Kimba size, doctor.
Be tripping out, Kimba, be tripping.
Kimba in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey there, it's me, Kimba. Radio broadcast, season 4, episode 2, Midnight Rider. I am celebrating 37 years on the radio in South Florida. And recently I was on a friend's podcast and he asked me the following question.
How did you know you had a voice for it? Because that's not something you're necessarily born with. Like as soon as you got on the radio, you could recognize your voice.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I just knew I really liked the idea, had everything I loved. Music, creativity, and anonymity. I wanted to be famous anonymously, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Before I play this, your voice does, or used to, matter. You wanted a nice sounding, mellifluous voice to go over the airwaves. So it seems to matter less these days, as a lot of things do in the industry. That said, this is what it sounded like the first time I was on the radio in South Florida.
FM 91, hi there, you got Kimba here pouring out 2.5 decades of your favorites. So drink up and savor the flavor of South Florida's music alternative, FM 91.
We call that telephone voice. We're used to anyway. Kind of like when your mom would talk to you a certain way and then the phone would ring and she would pick it up and say, hello. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was thinking that I had to sound a certain way. And so I was talking from like up here, FM 91. I could still kind of do it. That just wasn't my actual voice. I was just trying to sound like I was an announcer. So that's how that happened. And then when I got the job on Zeta in October of that year, you could even hear my voice has changed and gotten closer to what it really was. It got a little bit deeper, I think.
94.9 Zeta 4, quality rock and roll. I'm Kimba, and we are just around the corner from 16 songs in a row. We've got Clapton, classic Dylan, Zeppelin, all this and more, starting right after the Rock Report.
Yeah, and eventually I found my voice, which was my actual voice. You're trying so hard to sound a certain way when really, once you lose that and just talk with your regular voice, you concentrate less on how you're sounding, and the words that are coming out of your mouth are a little more important. Also, when I was on my friend's podcast, I got to tell this story about the Allman Brothers that I told like a tiny little bit in the episode. It was the last episode of season 3, episode 5, I Will Survive, when I was talking to Adam Gaynor, singer-songwriter, former member of Matchbox 20. We were talking about how we met. And it involved the Allman Brothers, but I didn't do a deep dive into the actual story because that really wasn't part of Adam and my story. They were part of how we met, but I really wanted to talk with him about us, so that didn't really come into play. But when I was on my friend's podcast, I got to tell this just once in a lifetime happenstance, right place, right time, right phone call kind of story that certainly wouldn't happen today, that's for sure. And I believe I may mention it when we're talking about this. There was no cell phones. I didn't happen to have a camera with me. So there's no documentation as far as film or photos or audio. I can just tell you that it happened, and I'm very happy that it did. And it kind of went like this.
We were talking about how we met, and we met at Criteria Studios because he was answering the phones. And somebody had called me while I was on the air. I worked nights. It was like late '89 and said, oh, the Allman Brothers are recording at Criteria. And if you don't know what Criteria is, it's one of the most famous recording studios
in the world.
It's in North Miami. Eric Clapton, Aretha Franklin, Allman Brothers, Aerosmith, Eagles, you name it, Bee Gees, they've all recorded there. And Tom Dowd was producing. It was their Seven Turns record. And Adam answered the phone. That's how I met him. I didn't know he answered the phone at the time. And they had their road manager, Red Dog, called me back and said, why are you asking? And I said, well, because it's cool. He goes, do you want to come and watch them record? And I said, yes. And then I immediately went, crap. Because I'm a young thing at this point. And I'm like, I just said that I worked 7 to midnight. I just said I was going to go to a soundproof building at midnight with the Allman Brothers. You know their reputation, right? I said, well, I have a colleague who loves you guys. Can I bring him? And he said, him. Yeah, not another girl. And he said, again, '89. Things were. Next thing you know, they have guardianship of us. Here you go.
You're going on tour.
Well, okay, we'll get there. So I get Steve Stansel to come get me. We go to Criteria. It's Greg. I think Dickie was there. Butch, J-Mo, Johnny Neal, the blind keyboardist they had, and Warren Haynes. We're recording 7 Turns. Tom Dowd was there.
Okay.
And if you don't know Tom Dowd, Google that.
Yeah.
Legendary producer.
I got his
Big time
CD in there of his backstory. Also, he's on Amazon. They have a show based on him on Amazon.
It was, they couldn't be nicer. The one, I will tell you this funny thing. I used to always just think that I didn't understand why Cher dated Greg, because I just thought, like, oh, that's terrible to say ugly, but and then I met him in person, and he was really a beautiful guy. And I thought, wow, you know how sometimes on TV,
right,
all the bad, you'll see me on the podcast, all the bad features get picked up. And some people, that's why models are models, because everything is all symmetrical and stuff. Apparently, whenever he was on video, it just didn't do him any justice.
Right.
In person, he was a really good-looking guy. Just set the record straight on that one. So then he took Steve and I out to a BW bug he had out in the parking lot because he wanted us to hear the first single on cassette so we could hear what it would sound like in a car. And it was good, clean fun. Right? So we were sitting in a car in a bug with Greg Allman listening to Good, Clean Fun.
Yes.
And it hadn't even been obviously released yet. And then we were going to leave. And because Steve's like, we got to go. I would have stayed there all night watching it. And Greg says, this is another funny story. He's no longer with us, so I could tell these stories. He goes, I said, we got to leave. He's got to get home. He says, oh, I wanted to show off for you. So me, I'm as young as I was in my naivete. I look at Steve and I said, wait, he wants to show off for us. And Greg just went like, he goes, you weren't supposed to riff.
That wasn't supposed to be shared with
Right, with the class.
That was
but he thought it was cute. So we go and sit in the room and watch them record part of 7 Turns, the title track. And that's the first time I saw like the little metronome thing. And I saw how they had already laid the music. So they made the 7 turns, kind of like they went on 7 turns because they had more music than words kind of thing. And I never knew you did that. Like you had the words fit the music. Right. So that was really cool. So then, eventually we left and we got to see them a few more times on the road. And I got to be on stage at one of the shows. So I got to see I think it was Miami Arena. And I got to see what it looked like, what they see. A band of that caliber, that was like crazy. I got to hear what it sounded like on stage because I'm not a musician, so I didn't know it sounded so different. And then the funniest part, they were like projecting mushrooms and stuff because it was the Allman Brothers. And I turned to look, and I'm like, what is? My head was in front of a projector, so my big ass head was on on the screen. So if you're at that show and saw somebody's head, it was mine. But I brought something to show you because one of the brothers. Here's the difference with men and women in radio, could be in other things. Ultimately, Red Dog and Steve Stansel exchanged numbers and they became friends. And I guess when they would come into town, as women, we really could never do that. We could, but since the business was mostly men, musicians and colleagues, they're not, if they give you your number and their significant others like, well, who is this Kimba in Miami?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Right.
So it's funny now because I've talked to guys now and they're like, well, your network all these years. And I said, the ladies don't have the network. The guys do, but we don't.
That's interesting.
What the ladies have is one of the brothers taking a liking to her and trying for the better part of a year to have her come out on the road. This was 7 Turns, their tour in 1990.
Tell me what it is.
You have to look at it.
The
tour didn't start until July, but he sent this to me in January and just said, like, pick a date. And then they extended it in August, and he sent me another one of these booklets. The booklet is pretty cool. It's how they used to...
Wow. It's their whole schedule, their itinerary, everything?
Yeah.
Wow.
And when he sent me the one in August, so for the better part of a year, he was like, come out, no strings attached, you know.
Yeah, no strings attached.
Wow.
And
that is awesome.
Yeah. And I
they
thought,
have everything
yeah,
in
you're
here.
going to fly me out to the city of my choice, hotel.
So
but no
share
strings.
with the viewers what kind of you're looking at. Itinerary?
Yeah,
it's their entire crew.
It opens up with their personnel, everybody on the crew, everybody in the band. It's really cool. and then all the different tour-related offices, which is cool. It's like an industry book, really.
Yeah.
Your own personal industry book. I mean, the amount of phone numbers that are in this book. If you were like trying to go on the road and be an artist, it was like.
And now, of course, I'm sure this is all done email, and or it goes right to your phone and all that stuff.
But the whole itinerary.
This is 33 years ago. So.
Wow.
I did not ever go out on the road, and I will not disclose who it was.
That's
maybe
fantastic.
when I write my book, I will.
There you go.
I won't tell you which brother.
That's cool.
Thanks for having me, guys. You could find out if you want to see that entire interview, everything that we talked about, and they do a little intro in the beginning about riders, interestingly enough, with this episode called Midnight Rider. And then we just talk about radio and some other stories. I put the link to their podcast, to that specific episode, in the bio of this, so you can check out the entire interview. And if you like what you hear from them, you can subscribe and follow to them. If you have not already, please do subscribe to my podcast. And the video version of this can be found on youtube.com/herkimba. Thank you for being one of Kimba's herd, and thanks for listening to MeKimba Radio Broadcast, Season 4, Episode 2, Midnight Rider.
Let's keep this on the radio.